Okay, so we're rounding, I think the last little leg of this journey through the mind of, or the introduction to the personality and mind of Hongming. It's the fifth reading. The other four readings are available as links in the description box. We've been through a lot. I don't know, Quan, before we start, do you want to say anything, or should we just begin the reading? I think we could probably finish tonight. We only have 10 pages left to go.
Yeah, I would like to present something that I consider at the center of Confucianism.
Okay, go for it.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. So, so you remember probably that I presented the platform, the Chinese writing system, the epistemological journey, the square, and finally the triangle, which is the tempus dimension or the timeless dimension. I presented the four corners, the analect, the Chongyong, the Mencius, and the Tasue, the great learning. Today, I will present the center of the square. That is the most important in terms of epistemological journey. And that center is precisely on the Yi Ching. Because let's not forget that when I said that the center of the square is the hexagram, the center of the triangle representing the timeless reality is also the Yi Ching. So the Yi Ching is repeated twice, meaning at the center of the timeless dimension and at the center of the epistemological dimension, or using the Greek word kairos, K-A-I-R-O-S. So the Yi Ching is very special because it is made of two documents, and not everyone knows that. The Yi Ching in whole is a document of 24,500 characters. And those 24,500 characters are made by two documents. The first one being the Zhou Yi, the change of the Zhou dynasty. Zhou dynasty having ruled from 1046 BCE to 256 BCE. And that first document called the Zhou Yi is made by 4,400 characters. And it is the divination part. If you want, from, let's say, 3,000, 3,500 years ago. The second part of the Yi Ching is the other 20,100 characters, and that 20,100 characters collectively are called the Shi Yi, meaning the 10 wings or the 10 chapters, if you prefer. And that those 10 wings are about 2,500 years old. Meaning that between the Zhou Yi and the 10 wings, you have about 500 years of difference at least. Now, I want to go back to what I consider as something very important. Let's not forget that that mentality of epistemological development or epistemological journey started very long ago in China. And precisely at the very beginning of the document called the Zhou Yi, you have the four following characters. I just want to state them in Chinese. I will not speak about the characters. Is Yuan, Heng, Li, Zheng. Okay, Yuan, Heng, Li, Zheng. Four characters. Yuan, and here you have to distinguish between the meaning of, let's say, the Zhou Yi 3,000 years ago, and the meaning of the Shi Yi, the philosophical development 2,500 years ago. But you will see that there's a deep link between the two. So Yuan, Heng, Li, Zheng. Yuan means at the beginning, Heng, prosperity or luck or lucky. Li, meaning the beneficial configuration, or simply benefits with an S or without S. And Zheng, meaning the process of divination. But here you have to understand divination as the following. Let's not forget that the Shang dynasty, having ruled between 1600 BCE and 1046 BCE, invented the system of the Chinese writing. And when they began to develop that, what is called the divination process, you have to understand that the epistemological journey of the Chinese civilization started there. Because when the king or an aristocrat of that time wanted to ask a question to the spirit, it is not a passive process. It is a very active process. And I'm explaining that. You have 5 steps. The first step is that you have to start with your name and your function, meaning that it is something very personal that you are involved into. Okay, we are speaking of the personal epistemological journey. So it's about something very personal first. Second, you would write down the question. And after you wrote down the question, you are not waiting for the supposed answer from the spirit, but you are writing down your plan. Okay, I have this question when I go to war against, let's say, the neighbor to the east, right? So you write some plans, you write some possibility. Okay, I wouldn't wait for next month. A, B. I wouldn't wait for the army from the southern kingdom before going against the eastern kingdom. C, I would wait for more training of the soldiers before going. Okay, so let's just simplify that in 3 possibilities. Step 4, you will make the divination and you will record if the divination is favorable or not to one of your plans. And step 5, you will return after what happened in reality. Suppose you truly waited for the army of the southern kingdom before attacking the eastern kingdom, and you were victorious. Okay, so you will write down that, yes, I chose option B. I waited for the army of the southern kingdom, and I won against the eastern kingdom, and I was victorious. Okay, so those first 5 steps have been recorded. And when the archaeologists excavated the ancient palaces of the Shang kings, they found numerous inscriptions related according to that structure of the 5 questions or the 5 steps, if you want. So when you speak about divination in ancient China, it was not only, well, I want to do something, and what do you think about the future? Okay, it is about something that will involve the action of your mind and of your decision. So that was about the Zhou dynasty. It was 3,000 years ago. About the Shang dynasty, it was more than 3,600 years ago. So what I have described, the steps in 5 elements or 5 components, started with the Shang dynasty, maybe before, but before we don't have a writing system for us to know if they have done the same before, most probably. But at least in terms of history, we only have the testimony from the Shang dynasty 4,000 years ago. The Zhou dynasty, having begun to rule in 1046 BCE, repeated the same epistemological procedure, if you want. And around 2,500 years ago, there was a development of that philosophical part related to the Zhou Yi, only 4,400 characters, and the philosophical part is called the Shi Yi, the 10 wings, 20,100 characters, making the I Ching a document of 20,500 characters. So I want to say that the Shi Yi, the part made about 20,100 characters, are made of 10 chapters of 10 wings. Chapter 1 and 2 is about Tuan Chuan, meaning the transmission of the decision. Chapter 3 and 4, Xiang Chuan, transmission of the image. What is the image? It's about the hexagram, the lower trigram, the upper trigram, and the commands on each of the 6 lines. Chapter 5 and 6, Ta Chuan, the grand transmission. Chapter 7, some considerations on the first and the second character, heaven and earth, Van Yan. Chapter 8, 9, and 10, different considerations about the trigrams. I will not go into the detail about chapter 7, 8, and 9. I want to say that everything that I have said is under the main idea that tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame. So that tradition of epistemological development that I explain as the I Ching at the center, the analect, the Mencius, the Chongyong, meaning living center in infinite awareness, and Tasui, the great learning, is precisely about.
That's fixed. Sorry.
Okay, so that is about the tradition. Is that about? Is not the worship of the dead ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame. And that inner flame has been explained very clearly in 124 BCE by the philosopher Tong Chong-Shu, born in 179 BCE and dead in 104 BCE. And that I read the first paragraph of his introduction, his speech at the inauguration of the Imperial Academy in 124 BCE, and that I will take 30 seconds to read again what I mean by tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the transmission of the inner flame, is the following. If you remember, man receives his mandate from heaven and is therefore superior to all creatures. The creatures suffer troubles and defects and cannot practice humanity and righteousness. Man alone can practice them. All the creatures suffer troubles and defects and cannot match heaven and earth. Man alone can match them. So now I want to take some time to read.
Sorry, Quan, what was his name?
Tong Chong-Shu. Tong, D-A-O-N-G, is his family name. The D, once again, is pronounced like a T. So Tong, family name. Chong-Shu, his given name. Z-H-O-N-G-S-H-U, born in 179 BCE, so 300 years after Confucius' death, and died in 105 BCE. So he was as important as Confucius because, well, almost as important as Confucius, because what Confucius gave to Chinese civilization is precisely the opening of the aristocratic education to all, very important. And Tong Chong-Shu was the philosopher king at the head of the Imperial Academy in 124 BCE, when that aristocratic education has been incorporated into what I call the Chinese everlasting imperial matrix of the 4 books and the 5 classics. So once again, 124 BCE, and still operating nowadays in 2024. So I want to come back to what I said. The beginning of the book is what is called the I Ching, is the judgment of the creative. Okay, the three plane line at the lower trigram, the space, the 3 plane lines at the upper trigram is called Qian in Chinese, and is heaven. Heaven is also called the creative. And the judgment on the creative is the creative word's sublime success, furthering through perseverance. And what I want to make the rapprochement, if you remember what I said at the beginning with the first 4 Chinese characters, Yuan, Heng, Li, Zheng, that I said that it corresponds to the 5 steps of what is called the Chinese divination. But you have to understand that Chinese divination as an epistemological process in terms of a decision making. Okay, so you write your name and what is your function. 1, 2, you write down your question. You write down the options that you think are possible related to that questions. You make the divination and you write down the result of the divination. And after the event, you compare the results in reality with what you propose and with what you receive as an answer from the spirits. Philosophically speaking, It has been translated as what I read to you in the part called the Shi Yi, the 10 Wings, as the creative word's sublime success, furthering through perseverance, which is a philosophical way to talk about the epistemological journey as understood since 4,000 years ago in ancient China and developed by successive philosophical development, but that the two main steps has been recorded in the I Ching. First part, the Chou Yi, and second part, the Shi Yi, the 10 Wings. And now I want to read the center. So at the center is the Shi Yi. The center of the center is the process of epistemological development in 5 steps, as I just explained to you. And the center of the center of the center is the Tachuan, meaning Tachuan means the grand transmission. Okay, and once again, I repeat for the 5th time, tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame. And that inner flame is precisely that epistemological journey that you will do with as much awareness as possible. And now I will take some time to find the text. So don't worry, I prepared it in advance. You don't have to wait too long. Okay, so the Tachuan, the grand transmission, is the chapter 5 on 10. Okay, it is not a coincidence. It is at the center of the 10 chapters. And that Tachuan is, you have 24 poems. Like in the Tao Te Ching, you have 81 poems. In the Tachuan, the grand transmission at the center of the philosophical elaboration of the I Ching, you have 24 chapters. And here is the chapters is a little bit exaggerated, poems. Here, I will read you the first poem of the wing number 5. As heaven is above and earth below, so Qian and Kun. Qian is heaven and Kun is earth. So as heaven is above and earth below, so heaven and earth are one above the other. As high and low places are spread about, so higher and lower lines are set out. As movement and repose are normative, so whole and broken lines are distinguished. As events are of different kinds and things can be classed in groups, so good and ill auspices are generated. As figures are formed in heaven and shape are formed on earth, so alternation and transformation appear. Thus, whole and broken lines replace one another. The 8 trigrams combine with one another. As thunder and lightning stimulate, wind and rain fertilize, sun and moon move in their courses, and after cold comes heat. The Tao of heaven form creativity. The Tao of earth forms stability and completion. Heaven conceives the great beginning. Kun brings things to completion. Kun is the earth. Heaven conceives with spontaneity. Earth is empowered with simplicity. Spontaneity is readily recognized. Simplicity readily follows. What is readily recognized is accepted. What is readily followed brings success. What is accepted can endure. What brings success can grow breath. Endurance is the wise man's power. Brightness is the wise man's task. Being spontaneous and simple means grasping the principles of all under heavens. Grasping the principles of all under heaven means finding one's proper place in their midst. Of course, what I read on 2 pages can be explained during an hour. I'm not going to do that. I just want to underline three things. Things can be classed in groups so good and ill auspices are generated, as figures are formed in heaven and shapes are formed on earth. I would like to hear from you what you understand by when I read as figures are formed in heaven and shapes are formed on earth. I would like to know your reaction on those two lines.
Well, the first reaction from me is that you're talking about maths when you're talking about the first one, and geometry when you're talking about the second.
Yeah, that's not a wrong answer. That's for sure.
I've seen descriptions given in those two terms.
Yeah, it's not bad, because you know perfectly that in terms of philosophy and epistemology, because this poem is not for nothing that I said is the Santa of the Santa of the Santa. Okay, it is Chinese epistemology, ontology, and ethics and politics.
Yeah.
So those two lines, what you say, Paul, is not bad, but there is something more. I will give a hint to everyone. There is an obvious rapprochement with the Platonic understanding of reality. Okay, I read again the two lines. As figures are formed in heaven and shapes are formed on earth. And let's not forget that heaven is the timeless reality and earth is the time dimension.
Yeah.
In some way.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Kelly, please.
Sorry. In some way, you're talking about you're talking the lines. You're saying the words, and I think you mentioned something previously about between the lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got the lines and between the lines.
Yes, between the lines is the epistemological development. Okay, so I wouldn't once again bother everyone by showing again the fundamental stuff. The king, the top horizontal line is heaven, timeless reality. The middle horizontal line is the epistemological development of kairos in Greek. And the lowest horizontal line is earth, or the time dimension, correlating with the hexagram on the other side, on 6 lines rather on 3 lines. So when I said as figures are formed in heaven, what dimension I'm speaking of?
Jean-Sebastien has a thought as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, for the figures of heaven, we think about eternal stuff and abstract stuff from the 4th, 5th, and 6th line. For the body shapes, we talk about the physical stuff, some not eternal, the opposite, all the duality that's opposed to what's coming from the heavenly body. If I might say, all that is read in the 2 first line is kind of Masonic, as above, so below. I got a feeling it's the Western, yes, Eastern similarities. That would be my answer. I don't know if it's good, but
I think your answer is outstanding. And I would like to make, I would like to make a comment on the Masonic stuff. The Masonic stuff are inferior products coming from higher philosophy, like Chinese philosophy. So the mumbo jumbo are inferior spin-off from Platonic philosophy and from the I Ching, if you want my opinion. But that parenthesis being closed, I want to come back to the quality of the center of your answer. Okay, it is absolutely right. The upper 3 lines, 4, 5, 6, is about the timeless dimension. Okay, Plato would talk about the idea with the capital I. Okay, the eidos, the timeless forms. The Chinese said, as figured are formed in heavens. Okay, that's the Chinese way to say, as the timeless form are manifesting in the timeless reality. And when the Chinese says as figures are formed, as shapes are formed on earth, it's about precisely the object in space-time or in the time dimension. Absolutely. Okay, so Plato would say that what is in the time dimension are copies or imitation of the timeless forms in heaven or in the timeless reality, according to the Greek, and heaven for the Chinese. Okay, so once again, that is the center of the Chinese epistemological development. Okay, I said I want to talk about three things in the long poem. As heaven is above and earth below, so heaven and earth are one above the other. Do you have some comments on that? The first two lines of the center, of the center, of the center.
Well, we're talking about like bigger, biggest, the big and the small. The outer limits and the inner limits.
The
Yeah,
relationship
absolutely.
between them.
Absolutely. Yes.
And the relationship between them and possibly how to maneuver between the different points.
Absolutely. Because once again, what is the possibility for the construction of science? It is the possibility to discover universal laws. Okay, so those universal laws are inscribed in the timeless reality. Okay, as heaven is above, the timeless universal principles is what is meant by as heaven is above, right? And earth below, it means that when you are observing, when you are making mathematical calculation, when you are making rapprochement between different phenomena, you are going to the discovery of those timeless universal principles, okay, subsumed under the three major timeless forms of beauty, goodness, and truth. So it's as heaven is above and earth below. So heaven and earth are one above the other. So there is a relation between the two. So, and once again, because it's important, I show it again. If you take the character Wang, king, with the three horizontal line, the top horizontal line is heaven, timeless, universal reality. The middle horizontal line is the kairos, is the epistemological journey. And the bottom horizontal line is earth, the time dimension. So there is a link symbolized by the vertical line that is precisely that epistemological journey that the Chinese decided to divide in six: three in the time dimension, sense perception, intellect, social sophistication, 1, 2, 3, and three in the timeless reality, 4, 5, 6, beauty, goodness, and truth. Second point important that I want to discuss with you, and now the last point that I want to discuss with you, because I will not explore the poem in its entirety. It will take an hour. So when I read the following four lines, the Tao of heaven is creativity. The Tao of earth is completion. Heaven conceives the great beginning, and earth brings things to completion. What are your reactions to that?
Can you read that one more time just to let it really sink in?
Yes. And first I want to remind everyone the meaning of the character Tao in Chinese. Okay, I said it last time, but maybe you forgot. So Tao in Chinese, when you write it, on the left side, you have the symbol for moving. And on the right side, you have the symbol for a head. But here, you have to understand the fountainhead, the source. So the Tao is moving to the source. Okay? Okay, that's been said. I repeat the four lines. The Tao of heaven forms creativity. The Tao of earth forms completion. Heaven conceives the great beginning. bread with a capital G, and beginning with a capital B. Earth brings things to completion.
Metaphor for acting in the image of God.
My God, exactly, Paul. That is the Chinese way to say capax Dei. Okay, in the sense that you, once again, okay, it's the last time for today. I don't want to bother too much people. If there's one thing that I want you to remember, because I think it's the 10th time that I show it, it's those two stuff. The character King, Wang, and the correlating hexagram. Okay, I chose the number 11, but it can be any one of the 64 hexagrams. Heaven, man, and earth. In Greek, tempus, kairos, chronos. Tempus, heaven, the timeless reality. Kairos, man, the epistemological development. Chronos, earth, the time dimension. And when you want to have a more detailed explanation of those, of the vertical line reuniting heaven, man, and earth, you go to the hexagram. So you have the lower trigram, 1, 2, 3, sense perception, intellect, social sophistication, the space symbolizing the classical education, 4, 5, 6, the upper trigram, beauty, goodness, and truth. So I wanted to not, what I'm speaking to you tonight is very special because even the average Chinese are not aware of that, okay? Because that is the core of the Chinese classical education, and most of them, the average Chinese never read the 10 Wings. And I'm not even sure that they're aware of the existence of the 10 Wings. As I said to you, the I Ching is this first Confucian classic. And in that first Confucian classic, you have the Chinese ontology, the Chinese metaphysics, which is the same as ontology, the Chinese epistemology, the Chinese ethics, and of course, politics is a consequence of ethics. And that is the most important of the 9 books, of the 4 books and the 5 classics, as explained to you many times. The platform, the Chinese writing system, the square with the 4 books, and the triangle with the 5 classic, with the I Ching at the center, and the hexagram at the center of all the Chinese thought. And I want to remind you that that Chinese thought has been created because the kings 4,000 years ago and the aristocrats 4,000 years ago, when they were asking advice to the spirits, it was not a passive attitude. It was an active attitude, in the sense that they wanted assistance from the spirits, but at the same time, they were making their minds work and making hypotheses, and they wrote down their hypothesis, and they even come back after the event to compare the reality with the hypothesis and with the advices from the spirits.
No, that's really important. That's so important to really make that explicit, because obviously us here, in this little digital room, are very fascinated. We're all united by a fascination about how the hell did it get so bad, and we're used to looking at the corruption of epistemology, and the oligarchy's misuse of these higher idea sets. And obviously, in various cultural matrices, you have this very weird, superstitious corruption that comes in with when those who want higher knowledge do it through some sort of a passive way where they want to channel the conduits of the gods. They give up their own powers of discernment and judgment, and they sort of like let themselves go to some higher priesthood that will give them a message from the deities, or that's like the bad way of praying in the West. We want some gifts and charms from the angels or the saint that we're praying to, and it'll thus happen. Very, very passive, very, very dangerous. And we see the destruction caused by this way of thinking. But what you just outlined in terms of this active way of engaging with the text of the I Ching and these other broader texts, as far as laying out hypotheses, testing out, reevaluating what worked, what didn't work, it provides a nice bridge that's otherwise lacking between the domain of being of the higher realm of ideas and the domain that we live in, which otherwise it's very difficult to bridge that gap in a reasonable manner. So
It's an
I've got
ongoing process.
a little aside about that one, Matthew. I watched Courtney's presentation on the New Age yesterday, and I think that the perfect description of all of that is to take the character that Quan is bringing up all the time on his little circular disc with the 3 lines, and I would define the New Age as that character with the middle line taken out.
Yes,
No
exactly.
epistemological journey whatsoever. I couldn't help but think that when you were describing it before, Quan. As I said, I watched Courtney's last night, and
Wow.
when I heard your description of it, I thought, yeah, that's a perfect metaphor for the New Age. Just take out the epistemological journey.
I'm absolutely delighted by your reaction, Paul. It justified that I show the diagram at least 10 times.
Yeah.
That being said, I just want to take another 5 minutes because I want to make it clear that the 4 books with the I Ching at the center is truly at the center of the epistemological development. Okay, once again, Tempus is the triangle. The square is Kairos, man, the epistemological development. In the case of China, the platform Chronos is about the Chinese system of writing and Chinese civilization in general. So I took 20 minutes to talk about the center of the center of the center. I just want to read again the very beginning of the 4 corners. It will take 1 minute for each. But I want you to understand that those very abstract stuff at the center of the center of the center, the grand transmission, because once again, tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame. And what is the center of the center of the center is high ontology and epistemology. But at the 4 corners, corresponding to one of the 4 books, you have the same teaching, but expressed in a simpler manner. So I want to read the beginning of each of those 4 books at the 4 corners of the centers. And remember, it is related to the center of the center of the center that I just discussed with you. So, the beginning of the Analects by Confucius. The master said to study and at due times practice what one had studied. It is not a pleasure. So it is center on study and advancement by epistemological development. When friends come from distant places, it is not a joy. Once again, study, understanding of reality is not something that you do alone. There is a part that is alone, of course, but it is also by discussing with people, by exchanging ideas, by exchanging your theories with other peoples. Always being enthusiastic, even when your talents are not acknowledged. It is not a junzi, a gentleman. So once again, the epistemological development might bring you success, wealth, and power, but it is not the prime motivation for the epistemological development. It might happen, as it might not happen. That is the beginning of the Analects by Confucius. Now, I will read you the beginning of the Ta Shui, the great learning. The Tao of great learning lies in making virtue brilliant, in making the people new, in coming to rest in the highest good, meaning to make your infinite awareness active and present, to influence people with that active infinite awareness, and in coming to rest in the highest good, meaning to rest in that infinite awareness in your life. Only after wisdom is stabilized does one possess certainty. Only after one possesses certainty can one become tranquil. Only after one becomes tranquil can one become secure. Only after one becomes secure can one contemplate alternatives. Okay, remember the kings and the aristocrats making hypotheses and plans about what are the possible answers to their desires or to their plan. And only after one can contemplate alternatives can one comprehend. Now I read to you the beginning of the Mencius. I will have to check the text because it's a bit longer. Okay, don't worry, it's a bit longer, but it's not so long. It's about 15 lines. Mencius appeared in audience before King Hui of Liang. The king said, "Sir, you have not regarded 1,000 li too great a distance to travel here. It must be that you have come to profit my state." Mencius replied, "Your Majesty, why must you speak of profit? Indeed, there is nothing but humanity and right. If your Majesty says, 'Whereby may I profit my state?' your grandees will say, 'Whereby may I profit my family?' And your gentlemen and common people shall say, 'Whereby will I profit myself?' When those higher and lower compete with one another for profit, the state will be in danger. In a state of 10,000 war chariots, meaning a big state, okay, a state having 10,000 war chariots, the man who assassinates the ruler will surely have a family estate of 1,000 war chariots. In a state of 1,000 war chariots, the man who assassinates the ruler will surely have a family estate of 100 war chariots. Such men have a 10th share of the state's force, and it is by no means a little. If right is placed to the back and profit to the fore, such men will never be satisfied unless they seize it all. Never has a man of humanity abandoned his parents, and never has a man of right put himself before his ruler. May your Majesty simply speak of humanity and right. Why must you speak of profit? So here in the Mencius, you have a very down-to-earth political application from the ethics, which flow from the epistemology, and the epistemology flows from the metaphysics or the ontology. And now I want to take another minute to read the very beginning of the Chongyong, that is most of the time translated as the doctrine of the mean, but I think that that English translation is very bad, and Chongyong should be translated as living center on infinite awareness. Okay, so I read it again. Beginning of the Chongyong, that which is ordained by heaven is our nature. To lead by our nature is called the Tao. To cultivate the Tao is called the teaching. So all my speech since the last 30 minutes, I once again repeat for the 5th time, tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame. And that inner flame, and I promise it's the last time today that I will show the graph, is the vertical line of the character Wang that I show here with my finger. That inner flame is the vertical character, is the development of infinite awareness, allowing you to be united because you will be heaven, man, and earth, or you have your timeless reality through the epistemological development, and you will live your life on earth, the time dimension, chronos, center on infinite awareness. I stop my speech here for today.
what did you say about the ashes? We're not supposed to look or
Well, when
dwell
I
on the
say
ashes.
Well, when I say that tradition is not the worship of ashes, it means that tradition is not the stupid and robotic repetition of what the ancient master told you, but tradition is the living transmission of the inner flame. Meaning that tradition is a teaching that will make you capable to have your vertical reality, to have the vertical line of the character Wang, to be capable to be centered on infinite awareness in your everyday life. That is the living transmission of the inner flame and not the stupid and robotic repetition of sacred texts and of stuff like that.
Mhm.
I equated ashes to like something from the past.
Yes, exactly. What is written is something from the past. So it is that ashes, if it is not transformed into the living transmission of the inner flame in you.
Which implies that the tradition is not always the same, that it's organic, it develops.
Well,
Dynamic.
tradition is timeless. The reality of the inner flame is timeless. It is always the same 10,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, when the Chinese kings were making the ceremonies, etc. And it's the same now. But the teaching has to be renewed in order that it's not the worship of dead ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame, precisely, which is timeless.
Well, is there a development of processes to keep the flame from becoming ashes?
Well, you have to, well, my answer is always the same, the Tao, D-A-O, okay, small detail, the D in the pinyin transcription system is pronounced like a T, okay, but it's a D. D-A-O, the devoted aristocratic oligarchy. My hypothesis that if a people, a nation, lost completely or almost completely its devoted aristocratic oligarchy, that nation would be dead in one generation. Maybe the name of that nation would still exist on the map, but that nation is no longer a living entity. That nation would be enslaved by nations having a devoted aristocratic oligarchy. I don't want to make too much politics tonight, but I want to give a practical example because there are nothing better than a practical example to make you understand. There's a nation on earth now called Ukraine, but that nation doesn't have a devoted aristocratic oligarchy. So that nation is completely and comprehensively abused by other nations. I think there are 600,000 men from Ukraine who died in the war against Russia. That is a poor nation devoid of a devoted aristocratic oligarchy or a Tao, according to me.
Pretty fair description.
Mhm.
So you always have to, of course, some nations are so young that they did not have the time to create a strong enough devoted aristocratic oligarchy. Some older nation like China, for example, who went through a very difficult period between, let's say, 1850 and 1950, but that devoted aristocratic oligarchy never died. And because that devoted aristocratic never died in China, the Chinese nation managed to be reborn again.
Could you say the same thing about Russia under Putin compared to the Soviet Union?
Absolutely. And you know that the devoted aristocrat, the devoted aristocrat, go ahead.
It's not like they had to reinvent their culture. They had to reconnect with an older culture.
Absolutely. And you know that the devoted aristocratic oligarchy in Russia is called the Siloviki. And Siloviki means the servants of the state.
Yeah.
And as I said, I always prefer to call the CCP not as the Chinese Communist Party, but as the Chinese Civilization Party, which is the name of the devoted aristocratic oligarchy of China for me.
Yeah, that connection to tradition is very important. I mean, in the West, you'll hear nothing about Putin in his early days, except that he was a KGB operative. And my understanding is that he was a low-level bloody clerk in the KGB and wasn't there for very long, and that ultimately his connections to the church, which despite 70 years of the Soviet Union was still there. I mean, you know, your DAL, for example, the aristocratic oligarchy, was still lurking in the background, and that foundation and connection to older tradition is part of the foundation of Putin's success, I would suggest.
Absolutely. And maybe there are other solutions, but that is the solution that I think is the best. So I have finished my little speech for tonight.
Yeah, that was a beautiful little surprise. I really appreciated that. So how about we transition now and read the last 10 pages of this very interesting document. I will do a little screen share. Okay. Can people see that Word document?
Very small.
Yep. I hear you. I hear you. How's that?
Number one, it's black on white this week instead of white on black, Matthew, so it's much better.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
I don't know how you managed to change it, but it is easy.
Well, I'm using a different computer. That's all.
If you can bring up that font a little bit stronger, though. A little bit.
Yeah, I can probably do that. I think we ended on page 23 or 24.
Yes, it was at the paragraph, admittedly, even in a Confucian society.
Yep, that's correct.
One. Admittedly. Oh, it was up there, right?
I think it's further back the other way.
Oh, the down?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the second paragraph. The second paragraph.
Keep going.
That was after Goethe. No, not there. As I see it. Here.
Okay.
Admittedly within a Confucian
society.
I'm misspelling it.
If you count from the title of the section, Confucian Principle of Loyalty, is 1, 2, 3 pages after.
There we are.
Got it. All right. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I can read that.
Yeah.
If you want me to read. Yeah, sorry, I'm being presumptuous.
I mean, you're a great reader, Paul. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. I don't mind doing it. I just don't want to be presumptuous. If somebody else wants to read, that's fine. Excuse me.
No, it's all
okay. So we start.
Sure.
Okay. Admittedly, even in a Confucian society, only very few individuals can achieve true education and attain notable social and political positions. Hence, there are prima facie reasons to take Confucianism as a form of elitism that exclude the masses from complete moral self-realization and social and political advancements. Now, if we take elitism in the most general sense as the management of social and political affairs by a small number of elites, then Confucian political philosophy, like most pre-modern Western political theories, indeed approves the rule by the elites. However, the charges on Confucian sagehood as anti-democratic elitism may still be unwarrantable, as it might have overlooked the spirit of Confucian political philosophy. Here it is helpful to call attention to 3 points. First, for Confucius, not only is moral education... Oh, whoops.
So sorry. I'm using a really bad mouse. It's so bad. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I can sympathize. My new computer, hopefully all the parts have been bought and my friend is coming around later this afternoon to build me a new one, and that will include a new mouse and keyboard too. Anyway, first, for Confucius, not only is moral education open and possible for all, Analects 1538, but social, economic and political advancements are also not a condition for self-moral realization. Wang 2017, 1227. Hence, the division between the elites and the ordinary persons does not stem from authoritative hierarchies, but from functional distributions of social roles and responsibilities according to virtues and capacities. Second, it is unwarrantable to regard a Confucian sage as a self-proclaimed exemplary or superior person, a godlike, omnipotent elite who rules the country by telling everyone what is the right thing to do. I'll forget the references for now. The true justification for Confucian leadership is not a philosophy of entitlement based on superior knowledge or power. It is rather their utmost kindness, openness, and humbleness, their exemplary senses of responsibility and good faith that induce the participation of all citizens in the beneficent social and political order. Thus, the provisional authority of Confucian leaders is not to certify greater profits and entitlements, but greater responsibilities and sacrifices. What a Confucian leader assumes is not the greatest authority, but the greatest loyalty. Loyalty to the true way of humanity and the cosmic, I think that's meant to be, cycle of grace and sacrifice to which all beings belong equivalently.
I just want to interrupt you, Paul, here. I would like to say that when they were speaking at the first point, there is a functional distribution of social roles and responsibilities according to virtues and capacities. It is perfectly correlated on the 6 lines of the hexagram, right? Because at the first line, which is the sense perception, it corresponds to the commoner. The second line, which is the intellect, wording, imaging, and so on, conceptualizing, it corresponds to the petty officer. At the third line, corresponding to social sophistication, it corresponds to the officer. After that, you have the gap for the classical education. And the fourth line, the first line of the upper trigram, corresponds socially, well, epistemologically to the form of beauty, meaning justice. It corresponds socially to the ministers and the lords, even if you don't have lords nowadays, but it corresponds to the ministers. The fifth line corresponds to the timeless form of goodness, or the cardinal virtues of valor and humanity correspond to the sovereign. And the sixth line, which is the top line, epistemologically correspond to the timeless form of truth and to the cardinal virtue of wisdom, and correspond politically to the sage. So I want to say that it's not only theoretical, it has a very practical implication. And the third point, I don't want to make a comment on the second point, but the third point is loyalty to the true way of humanity and the cosmic cycle, and not the karmic cycle, the cosmic cycle of grace and sacrifice to which all beings belong equivalently.
Very good.
Continuing on, all in all, if we recognize that elite rule has turned out to be inevitable even for modern democratic societies, then a truthful rule by Confucian elites to promote the common good with good citizenship is certainly superior to those modern camouflage elitisms and oligarchies dominated by the interests and privileges of the pampered units.
Well, that's I love that. That's a great statement.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I just want to go back to the word oligarchy. Okay, once again, oligarchy only means the rule by a few. Oligos, a few, and arche, the power or the role. You have to qualify the kind of oligarchy, okay? Because of course I like the expression of the pamper units, because here, those oligarchies, we understand the plutocratic and the kakistocratic oligarchies. But if you have an aristocratic oligarchy, the idea of the rule of the few, in my mind, is not a problem if the quality is aristocratic. I stop here.
Let me say one thing.
Sure.
A devoted aristocratic oligarchy is precisely what the American founding fathers had in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Go on. It degenerated a little bit since the last 200 years. I don't want to be ironical.
No, but even in their own lifetime, they were totally disappointed in how it came out. And they that instead of the aristocratic oligarchy being elected is it was people getting elected for their own gain. And they were very disappointed in that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, the US is an interesting case because the US managed to be a very powerful nation by plutocratic oligarchy. And I would say that they are sometimes in the US history quasi aristocratic plutocrats. Okay. I think that is part of the explanation why the US managed to become such a powerful country, because you don't get such a results without some moments when the US was endowed with quasi aristocratic plutocrats. Maybe, but well, I'm biased, of course, but I don't think that the US had aristocratic oligarchy for a very long time, maybe for one generation from time to time.
I think the problem that I'd seen again and again for those who were able to think on the higher level amongst the American intelligentsia who were able to tap into this more universal domain is that they were always struggling to uh, attach the concept of the USA within a broader continuum of universal history. And in too many cases, the weak spot was to see the nation as if it sort of appeared out of a vacuum in 1776, and a lot of people wanted to just pretend it was this new thing without precedent, which in some ways it was, but in other ways that created, I think, a major blind spot for many of the leadership class to get corrupted by and not see, well, what are the broader principles at play that I should be interfacing with in my own soul and acting accordingly. They didn't have that. So without that anchoring into something broader, they're much more easy to be duped into mysticism, all of these weird, Scottish Rite Masonic lodges, the skull and bones, all of this crap that just, enchanted them into this
Well,
this sort of drunken state of wanting to be this glorious new empire. Um,
Well, well, you know my opinion. Empire is not a dirty word for me. Okay, I would call imperialism a dirty word, but that is a detail we can come back later on. But what made me enthusiastic about your comment is that as when I read the center of the center of the center of the I Ching, the Grand Transmission, Sebastian reacted by saying that it sounds a little bit like Freemasonry stuff. Well, those high teaching can be used to spin a lot of stupid mumbo jumbo, believe me. If you don't have precisely the right teachers from the devoted aristocratic oligarchy to explain you that it is to make you capable to be centered on infinite awareness, but serving the others and not going to your selfish fantasies and delusional imagination. But anyway, be it the grand transmission from the I Ching or the dialogue from dialogues with an S from Plato, you can spin the same mumbo jumbo anyway.
yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Continuing.
Sure.
Last but not least, even for imperfect political situations like the lack of a sage ruler, the adherence to the principle of loyalty to one's duty of good citizenship with a sense of right and tact, viz. With the good taste or common sense of the gentleman, should still be the best way to transform oppressive political situations step by step. Remarkably, here is the dividing line between Wu and new Confucian thinkers like Zhu Fu Duan, Mao Zedong-san, and Tu Weiming, apologies Quan, who believe that traditional Confucian governments based on the rule of the people and for the people must be modernized towards the universal democratic scheme of rule by the people.
Okay, here I would like to, may I interrupt you? Rule by the people, yes, but by what kind of people? Okay, rule by the people means that all the people of a given nation are allowed to have political ambitions. Okay, that is clear for me. But when they are allowed to have political responsibilities, means that they have proven themselves first to be worthy of a certain level of political responsibility. And if they manage to prove that they were capable to manage that first level of responsibility, they would be promoted to a second level, etc. So it is not because there is an aristocratic oligarchy supervising the quality of the officials that it is not the role by the people. Of course, you are speaking to an enemy of the electoral system that I consider as being a circus. I am biased for those who don't agree with me.
I'll finish that paragraph. As Steve Engel summarizes nicely, because we cannot count on having a sage ruler, all must be limited by objective democratic political institutions. Boy, that sentence resonates after the debate last week. Never mind. Sage ruler. Yeah. In contrast, Gu abided by his loyalty to the King Court as the loyalty to the religion of China, to the cause of civilization of the Chinese race. For Gu, what is truly universal is the cause of good government, but not any purportedly superior institutional schemes. When we have the right vision of true democracy, Confucian political order based on sagehood and good citizenship, with a view to improving imperfect political situations through reciprocal moral education and transformation, is not only impeding democracy, but can also be a best personification of its true spirit. As evidence, Gu referred to Emerson's American idea of non-government and non-resistance as the greatest practical idea of modern democracy and modern liberalism. It agrees with both Confucius and Goethe's ideal of the best form of government, which tends to make all government unnecessary. On the other hand, taking the cue from a sarcastic line in Shakespeare's Macbeth on there being enough liars and swearers to beat and hang all honest men, Gu pinpointed a fatal outcome of modern constitutionalism and majority rule that threatened to suppress the weak and the unfortunate forever. All honest men in America have been or are in danger of being hanged. The heart of the problem is that modern Americans have lost the spirit of their fathers, those true early Americans, and thus become unworthy of the institutions which their fathers intended for them. In light of Confucian teachings, it is the men in the nation who make the institutions and not the institutions that make the men. Written in 1901, yeah. As I see it, whether we should prioritize sagehood and good citizenship or democratic institutions, thanks, Matt, I'm just waiting till you stop move that, and how they may complement each other are important questions open to calm and conscientious debate. The key issue here, however, is what should be the universal base for comparative moral and political discourse and international relations. The cause of good government committed to promoting both common good and personal development, or modern Western schemes of constitutionalism, majority rule, and individual rights. It is the presumption of the latter that have prompted colonial and imperialistic policies of Western powers in China and other nations, such as the rule of force policy reported by Anson Burlingame in 1861. The Chinese are conceited barbarians and must be forced into our civilization. In Gu's view, unless the foreign powers and foreigners change their policy based on dogmatic universalism, dominant materialism, and the right of might, there would be no way to avoid what Sir Robert Hart had prophesied as the terrible outbreak of Boxerdom in China. In a way, Western capitalist expansions and colonial and imperialistic policies have caused devastating consequences not only in China, but all around the world. The two world wars, the outbreak of communist revolutions, and the so-called global age of terrorism today.
I would like to interrupt you here. I think that the last two paragraphs were absolutely outstanding. And I would say that the Chinese political philosopher distinguished between Wang Tao, meaning the kingly way, and Pa Tao, the hegemon way. And Pa is translated directly as hegemon. So I would say that the last 2 centuries has been, of course, we're in 2024, it's easy for us to take it easy. Maybe if I was living in 100 years ago, I would not take it as cool. But I would say the last 2 centuries has been the perfect illustration that people who are not advanced epistemologically speaking, are not ready for empire in the true sense of the word. And I want to say that empire for me is a glorious word, and I once again, with my proclivity to make acronyms, I wouldn't bother you all for taking 3 minutes to explain what I mean by empire. Empire for me explained by the two following words, peace and glory. And peace is an acronym, P for peace and order, E for education offered to all, A is for aristocracy open to all, precisely. C is comfort for a dignified life. And E is an established universal health system. That is for the acronym peace. And glory is for G, is for global security architecture. L is for lifting everyone out of poverty. O is for opening of the minds, exploring the inner universe. R is research on the outer universe. And finally, Y is yearning for space exploration, and with practical projects linked to that yearning for space explorations. So I'm grateful that you did not interrupt me so that I can explain to you what is empire for me, peace and glory. And what happened with the Western domination of the world during the last 2 centuries was certainly not empire, but was imperialism. And I will take another minute to explain to you what is imperialism. Imperialism can be subsumed by 6 words: expansion, expropriation, enslavement, evangelization, epidemics, and extermination. That is the short way to understand what was imperialism in the last 2 centuries. And thanks God, those imperialists will go down quite soon. I stop here.
Not soon enough. Continuing, as a fact, it is the disillusionment about the signifier civilization of the West that has led Henry Rosemont and many truthful intellectuals to believe that major problems of the world cannot be even addressed properly within the confines of capitalistic economic system. For Rosemont, the answer to global ethics is not moral universalism, but a soft form of pluralistic relativism featured by role-based contextual ethics. Thus, Rosemont seems to affirm a current view on the mission of morality, which is not to judge right and wrong based on a universal principle, but to determine best action in a given circumstance by balancing competing goods and values, such as the values of equality and freedom advocated by communists and capitalists, respectively. In my view, Rosemont's rejection of moral universalism is no doubt well intended. However, without a universal standard, how should we balance competing goods and values except for submitting to the free competition of these values and goods themselves? It is a good progress that while the old world recognized only the right of physical force, the world today tends to recognize the right of intellectual force based on rational arguments. However, within the framework of free competition of values and goods, even the forum of rational arguments may easily degenerate into what Gu feared as the battlefield of divided interests. A terrible battlefield where the head and heart, the soul and the intellect come into constant conflict.
I would like to interrupt again, because here is a very powerful argument concerning what is called competitive politics. Once again, there's no universal solutions for everyone. I think that each nation has to find its own path. But from the Chinese perspective, when you have a competitive politics, like you have two adversarial party that would fight for getting the supreme seat, it is not the primrose path can be traveled down very easily, because what is perceived as rational argumentation can degenerate into simply a cover-up for your greed or for your anger, and not for really rational argumentation for the betterment of the common good. I stop here my rant.
Yeah, and too, the whole point that he's making is really important too, that there should be some universalism that we look towards as the basis upon which we judge right and wrong. Because if everything is completely relativistic and determined only by the material uh, dynamic at play within any given part of the world at any given time, it just quickly degenerates into the might of the stronger over the weaker at the end of the day, in terms of who's going to win because there's always going to be some form of competition, some form of tension. So who's going to come out benefiting as an outcome from resolving said tensions will really be those who can impose their will in some way, without referencing, well, what is it that all human beings universally have as attributes first? Like, what too many people skip that step and they don't think about that at all. So they get almost offended when you bring up, well, maybe there's something about the fact that we're mortal and we yearn for something immortal. The fact that we want something better for our children and our grandkids. That these very simple ideas on one level have become, almost because we're so not used to, I guess, just being exposed to them in our current society in the West. People get offended, and they actually, I've been attacked quite a bit from people who have said, "Oh, you're a tyrant. You're trying to impose some, what's good for you is maybe not what's good for me, or what's progress for Africa is not progress for Canada or something." And they just get completely scrambled in the mind, because they just haven't thought about, well, what is it about human beings, whether you're African or Chinese or Canadian, that is commonly human, universally so. They just didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Sebastian, I'm sorry to take for 1 minute. You wrote that you missed some meaning of peace and glory. What are the letters that you are missing, that you missed?
I missed the G, the L.
Okay, G is for global security architecture, and L is lifting everyone out of poverty.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for the interruption.
No, you got to bring dignity back to the word empire. It's been pulled through the mud too much.
I am a hidden agent of empire since the beginning, Matt, as you probably guessed.
All right, so we're arguably, or
yep, arguably predicated on the principle of loyalty, Gu's religion of good citizenship promises a royal path to the universal truth of humanity that may save us from this battlefield of divided interests and competing values. Even the deadlock between liberty and equality could be tempered and hopefully resolved if only we were able to understand their truest meanings. As Gu asserts, the Chinese word Dao expresses precisely the original American notion of liberty. In contrast with modern conceptions that allow for the liberty to be vulgar, to swindle, or to be heartless and cruel, the true sense of liberty, as the Chinese say, is to fulfill the law of our being and to do the will of God. This is also the original American notion of liberty. I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts.
Yeah, I think that everyone understood. I think that everyone understood, but I want to stress that again, okay? Freedom or liberty is precisely the achievement of your epistemological journey. Okay? It is not a license. Okay, license is precisely what has been defined in that paragraph as to be vulgar, to swindle, or to be heartless and cruel. That is license. Liberty or freedom is fundamentally the achievement of your epistemological journey, making you capable to receive the transmission, the living transmission of the inner flame, precisely what I said at the beginning of my little speech.
I want to say something about universalism. Because I think the multipolar solution is that you, at the top level, you simply say that the relationship between nations is one of mutual benefit trade. So it's a very simple world of dynamics.
Yeah,
but then each nation then doesn't have to have universal values with other nations. I mean, each nation has its own, as long as it's willing to play the mutual benefit game at the international level. At least that's my understanding of multipolarism.
Absolutely, but you will need this power. You will need powerful people, a powerful nation within the system, having devoted aristocratic oligarchy that will truly mean that it is truly for the mutual benefit of everyone. Because mutual benefit of everyone can be a very beautiful fig leaf used for exploitation. Because, for example, the word free trade has been used most of the time as a fig leaf to exploit the weak and the downtrodden during the last 2 centuries. And free trade, if you use the 2 words, it's not necessarily a bad principle. It depends if you have devoted aristocratic oligarchy whose members truly mean free trade when they write down free trade. And you also need members of devoted aristocratic oligarchy, let's say from at least 3 to 4 powerful nations that will truly mean what they write when they write down for the mutual benefit of all on earth. For example, the 2 acronyms that I offer for empire, peace and glory, it can be used as a beautiful fig leaf for exploitation too. So what is written has to be live in reality for that to be truly beautiful and just and true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like intention. It's important that there's some honesty embedded behind the intention when words are used, or principles of setting up a playing field of how we're gonna negotiate our relationships. If one side is being dishonest, the words might be very nice, but the dishonesty is going to betray the fact that they're going to create rules that they want their victims to fall into, that they're not themselves going to hold themselves accountable to. But if you actually have an honest plan, like an honesty in the heart, which animates the thought and the plan, to play by the rules you set for yourself too, and act accordingly, then you get a very different outcome. So free trade could become a very, very good thing when that honesty is there. But people so frequently, they've been trained not to think about intentions anymore. That's like become an incompetent, a great way to get ridiculed or not make it or get published in academia, or to be respected in polite society if you try to make recourse to intentions within your historical studies or in economic analysis. It's like a great way to just get disrespected. And the fact is that that's causal. That's the causal function of everything in human society, past and present and future. It's ideas and intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to go back what has been read 2 pages ago. Man and not system. Okay, because you can create the most beautiful system. I go back to the American system. Okay, I think that the American system on paper is not bad at all, but you need the right man to make that system a living system and not only a fig leaf.
Okay. All right. When he said that it's the men that make the system, not the system that makes the men. Although there's, I guess, an element of it's reciprocal, but the system itself is certainly shaped top down by individuals.
Yes, I think there is an asymmetry because the best man in the worst system would manage somehow to improve the system.
Yeah,
but the cacocrats in the best system would destroy the best system.
As they're doing these days. Yes. I love this next paragraph, folks. Likewise, in its truest sense, equality does not mean equal distribution of all for all, so that the best of the nation should become as bad as the worst. The soldier should command the general and horses should drive the coachman. It means equality against privilege and thus open door and expansion. The real meaning of expansion is that true education is possible for all people, regardless of their racial, social, and cultural differences. At the same time, there is harmony among the truly educated persons in the East and West, despite the different paths they may have traveled to realize this universal truth of humanity. Well said. The authentic meanings of liberty and equality, therefore, agrees perfectly with each other. Liberté, égalité, and expansion in its deepest sense. Fraternity means Christianity, or, as Chinese say, to look upon all men as belonging to the same humanity. As Gu related, Sir Challoner Alabaster had ascertained rightly the true meaning of Christianity in the Confucian notion of Ren, the Chinese word for the truth of humanity, which can be translated as love, moral sense, and empathetic openness. So contemporary deadlock between liberty and equality, like all the deadlocks caused by the battlefield of divided interests, admits only one true way of escape, namely to get back the evenness of your temper and your calm judgment, to get back your true self, or in the words of Confucius, to find the central clue and balance in your moral being. Thus, the ultimate solution to all personal, social, and political problems has to be a moral solution. The key to this moral solution does not hinge only and entirely on the sophisticated new theories and arguments presented at the podiums of academic conferences, national congresses, or United Nations. It lies also, and all the more, in the purest and simplest minds, in what Emerson once told Gu's mentor Carlyle as the dogma of non-government and non-resistance, which is the gun that does not need another gun, the law of love and justice that alone can effect a clean revolution. In Gu's view, this American idea of Emerson lies at the bottom of the Chinese civilization, which aims to gradually replace all governmental forces with the moral power of good citizenship, with the true social order predicated on the pure and simple mind of the gentleman. Presumably, even opportune economic distribution entails first the proper balance of our nature, so that all individuals and households can learn to balance their expenditures with basic personal and social needs and keep the happy union of the head and heart, the soul and intellect as the signifier of true freedom. Hence, the ultimate solution to all social and political problems has to start with what Gu calls true education, with the cultivation of the simple and pure mind that is essential for fulfilling the law of our being and fostering the average morality of the masses. Because in order to know what the law of being of the gentleman is, we must first be a gentleman and have, in the words of Emerson, the simple and pure mind of the gentleman developed in him. The whole mission of Confucian religion of good citizenship, indeed, is to consecrate this pure and simple mind as the soul of Confucian loyalty and the moral foundation of social order. True loyalty is not opposite to true liberty. Rather, loyalty as the reverence to the ideal of kingliness, to the dignity and liberty of another human being, is the essence of true education that teaches utmost sincerity and devotion for the truths of humanity. It is through this utmost sincerity, which is the creative principle of the cosmos, that one realizes true liberty and autonomy and becomes a kinglet, a sight of being that personifies the heart of sky and earth with empathetic openness. For the spirit of humanity consists in the sublime poetical and moral temperament featured by empathetic openness. It is the serene and blessed mood that enable us to see into the life of things.
Yes, and I want to read 4 or 5 words again. Loyalty as the reverence to the ideal of kingliness. Okay, the ideal of kingliness is precisely the Chinese character for Wang, for king, that I showed many times. The 3 horizontal lines for heaven, man, and earth, and the vertical line of infinite awareness uniting the 3 realities. Loyalty is the reverence to the ideal of kingliness. I would say that apart from the image of the character Wang, king, and the hexagram, that is truly the core of that text. Loyalty is the reverence to the ideal of kingliness.
I find it extremely enjoyable just to see Gu's approach to interpret people who I've come to read a lot of. I've read a lot of Emerson lately and increasingly Carlyle, and it's interesting because they're doing something quite dishonest and Delphic, but on the surface appearance, what they're saying is very true. about the need to create like Emerson is largely a proto-anarchist type, but he's very spiritual. He's got an idea that everybody should be empowered to be their best self, and thus you don't need external rules when everybody is their best self. And it sounds good. And it's true. It's actually true. But he, of course, being what he is as a transcendentalist, disciple of Mazzini, doesn't really think about the epistemological development that should be granted for everybody. And I don't even think he knows what it is in general for himself either. I don't think he necessarily got that opportunity. But it's like if you introduce the epistemological development, that journey for everybody, then what he just said will work. It will actually function just fine.
Well, once again, I think that I don't need to explain it to you, Matt. You already know it, but I want to say it all the same. The fake democratic man can spin a lot of beautiful text because he is socially sophisticated and his intellect is developed. So you cannot judge someone by what he's writing. You can be impressed, you can be elated, you can be absolutely ecstatic, of course. But when it is about government, you cannot just count on what the guy was writing. You have to supervise him through different levels of powers to see if he will maintain that epistemological pretensions through 10 years, 25 years, 30 years, 40 years. If someone is capable to be a hypocrite for 40 years, I'm quite impressed.
To me, it seems like a devoted aristocratic oligarchy really is a different concept totally from democracy. I mean, to rule by the people, the point is that a given person, they have a vocation and they have a family, and they're not thinking about how to solve some geopolitical problem or whatever, and to ask ordinary people to be the rulers of society doesn't make sense. So I don't know the whole. I guess you're making me question the whole concept of democracy.
Well, I think that first.
I mean, you call the Chinese system democracy that works, but
no. I never call the Chinese system democracy. I call the Chinese system a devoted aristocratic oligarchy.
But you, at some point, not tonight, but you were making the comment that really is a true, in some sense, a more democratic system than the American system.
First, I want to say that each nation has to develop its own path and its own system. So I don't want to be impolite, but the American, the Canadians have to walk their way and find what is suitable for them according to their culture, according to their proclivities, according to what they think is good for them. It's not the business of the Chinese people, as the system of the Chinese people is certainly not the business of the American people, and certainly not the business of the French or the Canadian people, just to take 2-3 examples. That being said, the devoted aristocratic oligarchy is based on the education and the gift of the epistemological journey. Okay, if you see how the system works in China since times immemorial, you will enter to school, and of course, during the imperial era, not everyone went to school. I am perfectly aware of that. There was a hereditary component to that, absolutely. But they were peasants because they were especially brilliant. They were capable to go to school and to manage to go through the system. But I am talking about now. Everyone can go to school till the end of high school in China. And within the school system in China, the teachers will detect anyone having a good heart and a good mind. And those people will be cultivated in order for them to be part of the open, devoted aristocratic oligarchy. Does it mean that it is a perfect system? No, of course, because the children who are born in richer family or in aristocratic family will receive the aristocratic education from early childhood, and they will have an advantage over the son of the peasant. It is for sure. However, for the Chinese mentality, what is good is that it is the honor of the ruler to be prepared in order to achieve the sacred endeavor with as much capacity, as much skills, as much abilities, from the technical abilities to the human abilities, in
Oh,
Damn, we've lost him.
order everyone. It is not the idea that everyone has to participate to political power. For the Chinese mentality, it is not a right for everyone to participate to political power. It is an honor that that person has to earn. If you don't have the right epistemological development to be a ruler, it is not an automatic right that is granted to you. But once again, that mentality is coming from Chinese culture, Chinese history, and Chinese civilization. The Westerners will have to find something that would suit them, and it's not of the business of the Chinese people, of course.
But I think education comes into it big time. I mean, a comment on Richard's comment before. Yes, most people, look at what's happened in the last 4 years with the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. So many people were completely incapable of looking at what was happening and really developing any understanding of the reality of it. I think that, Richard, if and I'm not suggesting that the West suddenly initiate an entire Confucian system of education, but if everybody had a common education that at least taught them to think in a, let's say, a higher way. I'm being superficial in that description, but let's just say that even when they become adults and fragment, if you like, in the sense of taking care of their own business first, family business, whatever, they would at least be in a better position to judge the rulers above. And in that sense, they would be participatory in a democracy.
Yes, and I would
it's an ideal. It's not a reality. It's an ideal I'm talking about.
Yes, and I would like to add the following. Even the Chinese people who don't have the honor to be among the rulers, there is an agency in China called the Chinese People Political Consultative Conference. It means that the Chinese people who did not manage to show that they are capable to be part of the rulers, they have a channel called the Chinese People Political Consultative Conference, through which they can express what they are not happy with. They can even suggest solutions, and those solutions will be taken into account at the local level and at the provincial level and at the national level. So I want to bring that nuance because once again, for the Chinese mentality, to be part of the rulers is an outstanding honor, but it doesn't mean that the rest doesn't have a channel to express their voices.
At one point, I spent a little bit of time, I might have mentioned it, that, I found a pen pal site online and I contacted a number of people from China, just random people. And one of the questions I asked them was, do you feel that you have any say in the politics of your country? And they all quoted exactly what you just said, the local level. They said
yes.
it. They said it enthusiastically. And these were people from, there was about a dozen of them all up, I think, from different parts of China. And one or two of them were expat Westerners as well. But they all expressed the same thing. Yes, people in China, the majority of them are never going to rise to positions of real power within the upper echelons of the Chinese rulership. But there is a participatory situation for them where they can act locally, and those actions can have both a strong local component, but it filters upwards as well.
Yes. And I would like to add something more philosophical or more metaphysical. And it would be difficult for a Western mind to take it, but I wouldn't take the risk. If you want to destroy an inferior man, give him the power and the wealth that he's not capable to manage.
Oh yeah.
That's very risky. That could do a lot of damage along the way.
Well, look
Absolutely.
at the damage it's done. Look at the damage it's done.
The damage is done, okay? But
Yeah.
I want to be the representative of the tyrannical Chinese mentality in this group. I take a deep joy for doing that.
Well, it reminded me of that little meme of Xi Jinping's strategy to defeat the West: sit back and watch it self-collapse.
Yeah.
Seems to be Putin's strategy too. And
Well,
you know, it's playing out. I mean, events in Europe at the moment, you know, I mean, Macron's dead, Schultz is dead. I mean, half of them, I mean, politically dead. You know, there's going to be massive transformation in that part of the world. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be painful for all of the people in Europe, of course, but it is happening. And it's a direct result of the sheer atrocity of the leaders that have been parading the international stage for the last half dozen years.
Well, there's actually an explanation for that. It's like, we know that Ukraine is being used as a proxy, right? We all know what that means. So it's destroying itself because it's being parasitically controlled. Similarly for Europe, Europe is being parasitically controlled by the United States. But what no one seems to notice is that US is also a proxy by its own oligarchy who became globalists, you know, over the past 20, 30 years, you know, like David Rockefeller in 1968 set up the Club of Rome and the Trilateral Commission. And those things really have led to the multipolar technocratic world. And so the United States is intentionally being proxied into being aggressive in the world so as to expedite the creation of the multipolar world.
Yes. Well, here I would like to add maybe a small geopolitical detail to what you just said, Richard. And I want to say that what you said is absolutely right and outstanding for my understanding. But there's a stuff called the Rumsfeld-Zebrowski doctrine. And the Rumsfeld-Zebrowski doctrine is precisely to provoke chaos and to wreak havoc around the world, because that kakistocracy knows perfectly that they can no longer compete. So the only way for them to survive maybe for another decade or another half decade, because according to me, I want to give a prophecy now, and a little bit like the ancient kings of China, I wouldn't write it down, I wouldn't check in 5 years if I'm right. I give them another 5 years, and that Rumsfeld-Zebrowski doctrine, wreaking havoc across the globe, is precisely the most lowly method that they found 20 years ago, that they limited to the West Asia, Iraq, Syria, and so on. But now they are trying to expand it to China and to Russia and to Iran, the three bigs who are capable to stand against them, hoping to prolong a little bit their miserable life. So it's on YouTube. I check in 5 years if they wouldn't still be on this earth.
And then someone's going to have to pick up the pieces after it's over.
Well, that is why I'm speaking of the devoted aristocratic oligarchy, because I'm not against the West. I think that the West has created a beautiful culture and a beautiful civilization. So there will be a transition period when those kakistocrats will fall, and the Westerners will have to create a new devoted aristocratic oligarchy. I'm not saying that the Westerners have to copy the Chinese model. That is not my speech. But I'm saying that they will create their own system, but at the core of any system, and that is my pretension, at the core of any system, you have a stuff called the devoted aristocratic oligarchy. If you don't like that expression, find another one. But in reality, it corresponds to that.
Yes, however we get there.
Well, definitely. I mean, looking at some of these great exemplars of real Renaissance thinking in the West, like Benjamin Franklin, I think people, even Americans, haven't really been exposed to any serious relationship or study of Benjamin Franklin's own writings. Which, when you do it, it's such a treat. And the guy was like immersing himself in studies of Confucius, and he was asked, like, you know, what's your inspiration? And his answer was, I try to live my life like Socrates and Confucius. And he was the one translating the Analects into the first one, right? His printing press was the first to translate and popularize the Analects in America in the 1740s. And he really wanted to model the new kind of government around the meritocratic structure that was already practiced in China for so long. And he knew that without that, it wasn't going to last. You need to have something that could create institutions that could have endurance, that were based upon these principles. So people, if they just read Ben Franklin, it hits you left and right. How these lessons were understood but not adopted by his followers, who got a little bit too egotistical in their own, grandeur.
One thing about Franklin, I could be wrong, but I don't think he had much of he wasn't a very religious person, was he?
Oh, he believed in God deeply. He believed in but I mean, he wasn't religious. No, he didn't. He referred to the different, hundreds of different sects of Christianity operating within the Americas. He gave in his autobiography as the example that it's like people are in a giant fog and they can only see clearly what's immediately around them, and whatever is fuzzy doesn't really exist to them. And he was just sharing his frustration that it was difficult, even though everyone was calling themselves a Christian, to just get some common agreements, and amongst these people who had everything to lose by not working together. But no, he was a deist. He believed in
something. He believed in something.
He believed in a reasonable, loving creator that made us in the image of said creative process. So he did believe in that. Yeah, for sure.
Like even like what we discussed earlier today, in China, you didn't come out and say it directly, but they were kind of spiritual as well.
Oh yeah.
When it came to like the kings making their choices, they I forget how you put it. They had to see a vision.
Yes.
That implies religion.
I would like to repeat that because it's important. Okay, Yuan Heng Li Cheng. It means the first step, you identify yourself, meaning that you take responsibility for what you are doing, and you function in the society. Okay, most of the time it was the king or the aristocrats of the time. Yeah, of course. Second, you write down your question. 3, you write down the solutions that you favor. 3, 4, 5 solutions. 4, you proceed to the divination. You ask an advice from the spirits, and you write down the advice, and you do your stuff. And 5, you come back for a reflection about what happened in reality, compare to your plans, compare to the advice from the spirit, and compare to the fact if you're happy or not, or with the results, and what would be your options next time, right? So it was, I insist on the fact that yes, it was a consultation of the spirits, it was a divination process, but at the same time, it was the primitive form of epistemological development that has been philosophically defined around 500 BCE with what I call, well, not what I call, but what the Chinese classical education call the Shi Yi, the 10 wings, okay? Because after all, it was the big stuff for today. I repeat again. The Yi Ching, the book of change. Oh, one important thing. The word Qing means the classic, okay? But Yi means the change, but Yi also means the unchange, okay? And I explain why. The character for Yi is the symbol for a sun and with the image of rain under the sun. So it means that there is change. The sun and the rain are two different things. But at the same time, it means unchanged. But because what is unchanged is the alternation between sunny days and rainy days. That is unchanged. That is a permanent law. So E means at the same time changes and unchanged, okay? Or if you prefer, timelessness and time, okay? So it is the whole reality. So that I Ching, the first part was the divination process, but with an active epistemological procedure or method. And around 500 BCE, meaning 2,500 years ago, it has been put in technical philosophical words. And that was the 10 chapters of the 10 wings. And the center of the center of the center is precisely the Ta Chuan, the grand transmission, chapter 5 and chapter 6 of the 10 wings. And what I read to you, and when I asked you to give your opinion about 3 sections that I read, if you remember, about heaven and earth. Okay, so again, that tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the living transmission of the inner flame that is precisely that vertical reality of infinite awareness that must be present in our actions in time. And of course that the Chinese are religious because they believe in the timeless reality, and they believe also in a time dimension, and that is there's that vertical reality that is reuniting heaven or the timeless reality with earth or the time dimension by man, which is the middle horizontal line of the character Wang. And I remind all of you again that loyalty is reverence to the ideal of kingliness or of personal sovereignty.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, it's the idea of a sovereign nation. It only works when you have sovereign individuals, which means that what you just said has to be manifest for for every person to be the king. That's not something that's without conditions. That's conditional on whether the other stuff was just met. If you fail on that, no, you're just an infantile ego wanting to do their own thing. And like you said, it's like license. It's not the same thing as like real freedom. It's just the freedom to do whatever you want to do, like a child, without any sense of like, well,
Yes.
what else? Why? Why should you do? Why do you have these freedoms? Why do you want to do good?
Well,
And then
Do what thou wilt shall be the entirety of the law. Yeah.
yeah,
See,
do what you will, but having the capacity to be responsible to do to what you will, right? The second part is missing.
Yeah.
Okay, because the first part is absolutely okay. Of course, do what you will, but have the epistemological level to be responsible for your actions.
Mm.
Okay, that is freedom. That is liberty. And once again, I repeat my controversial phrase. If you want to destroy an inferior man, give him the power and the wealth that he cannot manage. That is license precisely.
Hello, Francois Macron.
and so much more. Yeah, no,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
that's been proven with every passing day, more and more. Well, guys, we're rounding out to the 10 p.m. mark here. This, as always, wonderful. Quan, you and I could chat a little bit by Telegram of the next good thing that would be worth working through. I got a few considerations, but Yeah, we'll chat. I know definitely the Art of War, or at least a few chapters from the Art of War, is something that could be fun at some point. Whether we do that right away or whether we get around to it later on through another pathway. But that's an idea. So yeah,
Yeah,
let's
that,
do that, and then next week we'll meet up no matter what and have something good and edifying to
yeah.
chew on.
For sure. If you have something that you think can be prioritized, of course, go ahead, because I already chose the Hongming. It's only fair that you choose this time.
I was maybe thinking about maybe a drama piece by Schiller, maybe something, but we'll see. Let me think about it, and we'll have something definitely great by next week.
Well, if you have in mind a drama piece, it's okay with me, but I think that we should read one day letters 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17 of the aesthetic letters by Schiller.
I'd almost want to just do them all if we're gonna do that. But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, we
Maybe.
can do them all, but I think there are what 30 something of them.
It would be
Uh,
like a whole year's project, yeah.
yeah, and that's why I am proposing that there is something of a core
I got it.
in letters 10 to 17.
Yeah, there is. It's true. Or there's the sublime. Anyway, yeah, there's so much. It'll be great. Okay. Well,
I actually think that the Sun Tzu one really appeals to me a bit, because my only knowledge of, I mean, I actually got a copy of the book here, but it's packed away, so I can't pull it out at the moment and reread it. But virtually everything, all of the interpretations of that book that I've ever read have been Western interpretations. I
That's the Art of
would
War.
actually love to hear Quan Li talk about, what is the Chinese interpretation of that? I mean, I'm sure it's separate from, let's say, Clausewitz on war. I mean, I know the word war comes into it both times, and Westerners assume something when we use that word, and I think the Chinese think of it very, very differently. So that would be a good one. Anyway, 2 cents worth. I'm up for anything you want to read.
all right, guys. Till next week.
So
Yeah, very enjoyable. Very
Right.
enjoyable. And I'll say
Yeah,
it
thank
once
you,
again,
Quan.
Quan. I'll say it once again, Quan. I love your shirt, mate.
oh, thank you.
All you need is a
Ciao.
goatee and you look like D'Artagnan.
Oh, okay. I agree with you. Ciao.
Thanks, guys.